Nice to see everyone here. Welcome for this hour session. So I'm the chair. I'm Catherine Adams. I'll get all the panel to introduce themselves shortly. So let me just get the title right. This is a discussion on the role of the circular economy in creating sustainable workplaces. So we're obviously going to have a bit of a discussion between ourselves. We want to cover off a number of points related to sustainability, circularity, where we think we're at, what we can do better, what we should be doing more of, what we should be doing less of. Hopefully provide you with some really good examples of what's happening, which you can take away with you. And then a bit of an interactive session at the end. So we would very much welcome your questions as well. So as I said, I'll introduce myself. I'm Catherine Adams. I'm from a company called Reusefully. So I've been involved in the whole area of construction, material, waste, don't really call it waste anymore, resource efficiency, circularity for the last 20 years. And that includes lots of different activities, really. So really working across the supply chain, so with clients. I suspect there's a lot of designers here, but also with manufacturers, contractors, the demo guys at the end of the life as well, not to sort of discount them, across all a variety of buildings at all stages as well. So, but I know today it's much more on the interior fit-out piece. Also do quite a lot of work with government and policymakers when they are setting policy. That's another discussion. And so that's a real nice mix, actually, doing sort of the high-level strategy, policy stuff. And then I will go out, get my hands dirty, go around buildings and look for opportunities for reuse. So it's a nice mix. But that's enough for me. Let me introduce Dennis. Do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yes. Absolutely. My name is Dennis Wierenborg. I work for a company from Sweden called Silencio. We work with acoustic, high-performing and sustainable acoustic and sound-absorbing products. My title is Export Manager, therefore I handle all our markets in Europe where we don't have our own personnel. So I arrived from Paris yesterday, travel a lot around Europe, try to educate our dealers, professionals and end clients in how to think about acoustics in a good way. So that's what I do.
Thank you. Georgia?
Hi, my name is Georgia Elliott-Smith. I am the Managing Director of Sustainability Consultancy Element 4. I am also an environmental activist, out and proud. I'm a participant in Extinction Rebellion and Business Declares, which if you have not heard of Business Declares, then I encourage all of you to sign up and become members. My purpose really is systems change. So what I'm very passionate about is not just making a company or a product or a service more sustainable, but actually changing the systems in which we operate to make the whole of industry more sustainable. And really that's what I campaign on and what I challenge and try to challenge everybody in industry to look up, to not just, focus on their day job, but look at the systems that prevent us from being more sustainable because they're real, and that's why we're not just doing this in our day to day. In terms of the work I do, we work mainly in the property sector. So we work with developers, investors. We also work with end users, tenants, occupiers, to make individual buildings or portfolios more sustainable. And we work with organizations. So we've worked with furniture manufacturers and brokers and other types of manufacturing businesses, NGOs. One of my clients is sitting here today, to make organizations more sustainable as well and develop sustainability strategies. So kind of across the board, really, very much like Catherine.
Great, thank you. Last but not least, Alex?
I'm Alex Ings. I'm Technical Manager of Revitalite. I've been in the lighting industry for about 20 years, working through the transition from fluorescent light sources over to LED. So I've been involved previously in retrofitting LEDs into existing luminaire bodies, which is something we can touch on today, which is part of the circularity and sustainability drive that we're working towards with Revitalite.
I love your name, Revitalite. Do you want to say a bit more about sort of that, the whole sort of Revitalite process?
The purpose of Revitalite is to help upgrade lighting to save operational carbon, operational energy by moving a light fitting from a traditional fluorescent light source over to LED. I'm not sure how many people might be aware, but fluorescent lamps are going to not be able to be sold in various stages throughout this year, and the final phase is happening in February next year. Any existing lamps on the market will be able to be sold through, but no more fluorescent lamps will be able to be put on the market. So by kind of this time next year, anyone with a fluorescent light fitting won't be able to get a replacement lamp. So the idea of Revitalite is to help those people move over and transition to LED technology. But why do you need to throw a whole light fitting in the bin when the main body, the main carcass, perhaps the louver and the diffuser are all still completely usable? It's still completely practical to use them. All you need to do is change the light source. Why chuck 6 or 7 kilos of light fitting in the bin when you can keep 5 kilos of it in use and simply change the light source and reduce your operational energy and therefore carbon as well?
Thank you. I know there's, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's some shocking statistics about how much lighting just gets, wasted, and even when it's, perfectly adequate for a next life, definitely. So let's look at the bigger picture for a minute. Georgia, you work with a lot of clients in terms of sort of, interior and fit outs. What do you think, where are they at in terms of the whole sort of sustainability picture? Has it changed over the last few years?
Yeah, I would say, I've been working in sustainability for 25 years, and I feel like the last couple of years has been my time in the sun. Finally, I feel like people are actually going, there's something to this, we really ought to be doing a bit more. That's great. Still, I feel incredibly frustrated about the lack of pace and scale of change, which I'm sure you share the frustration. And I do think that there's quite a lot of business as usual and really all the sustainability stuff, although I think people generally get, on a personal level, they get that we're in a climate emergency. They get that there's a problem internationally, there's problems with human rights, there's problems with resource extraction, there's problems with waste. People get it, but I think there's a lot of, we can carry on doing business as usual and have a sustainability policy, and that'll be fine. We're doing our bit. And I think there's a real change of gear that we need, an understanding that we've got to fundamentally change our business models. And so what I love about the clients that I'm working with is saying not just let's bolt on a sustainability policy, but let's actually fundamentally look at what we're doing as a business. And when I work with clients, it's a really good day at work when I work with a board of directors, and they get it. Like the penny drops and they stop thinking about sustainability as something extra for their business, and they go, oh my God, this is everything we do. This is everything about the way that we do business. And when that penny drops, everything changes about the way they work, and it stops being about headlines and greenwash, and it starts being about really fundamentally what are our impacts. I love that. And so, yes, I think there is more of that. I want to see everyone doing that. And, I'm in this rarefied position where the clients I work with come to me because of my activist position, when they may have had an approach, they might have tinkered with it for a while, but they come to me when they're serious about change,
They know they can't mess around with you. So, Dennis, how does your sort of company approach sustainability? Is it very much sort of integrated in everything you do, from the sort of the concept and design of your products?
Yeah, I would say that we have from the beginning chose to work with materials that from the basics are sustainable. They are recyclable and natural in every way, and try to make products as functional and high performing as possible, and make sure they can, with just a small effort, be used and given a second life. So that is what we try to implement in more and more products. And if you look at the business today, we are not alone, but there are not so many that actually tries to getting better in this area. So yeah, we have come a long way. So I think we are onto something. We are really proud of what we have done so far, and since we are a small company from Sweden, we are not so well known here in UK so far, but We getting in contact with a lot of UK customers, dealers that really ask us to answer up to, all right, how good are you for real? And they realize that we are quite long ahead of most of the competitors. So it's really cool.
And how do you think it is in Sweden? Do you think they're a bit ahead of the UK, or you know,
yeah.
I do quite a lot of work in Europe.
Yes, Sweden is some,
Not in Eurovision. Let's not mention that.
Sweden is actually ahead of most countries in Europe when it comes to workplace ergonomics, sustainability, and working environment in general. So coming to another country, Southern Europe, for example, is a long way from Swedish offices. I have a meeting yesterday where we show a picture of Swedish police office, and French police offices doesn't look like that, they said. It's a big difference. So yeah.
So why is that, do you think? Why do you have that, you know, attitude in Sweden to much more sort of sustainability in the workplace?
I think it's something to do with our mentality, how we are as persons, and we say sorry instead of hey, I do that. You know, we are not first in line. We wait. Queues is something that we do in Sweden a lot. We wait until it's our turn. So and during that time we wait, we learn things and learn how to do things properly. So we don't rush things, and Silencio is a company that has done exactly that. We have moved slowly, grown slowly, and done it correctly. So
Yeah, and I think that's one of the hardest things, isn't it? Sometimes getting that thinking space to think things differently and change your business model. And you know, we're all rushed for time. All projects want to be done really quickly, don't they? So, yeah, I know it's but good to hear that. So, where do you think the demand's coming from in terms of sort of sustainability and circularity? Are you seeing much? You know, how many questions are you seeing, Alex, from you know the people that
We're seeing some. We're seeing it start to filter through. We had some projects earlier this year where we supplied lighting to a Cat A fit out. Obviously, a completely empty space, long runs of linear extrusion, and then when the tenant moved in, they wanted to use the same contractor again. So we had some of the fittings back. We reworked them, we repurposed them, and they went back to site to fit in with a new layout that was then put into the space. So we've had that side of things. We're seeing a little bit of movement there. And Revitalite as well. We're working on a couple of projects. We've done one in Fenchurch Street. We've done 2 levels over in Fenchurch Street over the last year or so, where fluorescent lighting was built into a chilled beam system. Obviously, they didn't want to strip out the chilled beam and have all of the aggravation, the cost associated with that. So we designed up a retrofit LED tray, more energy efficient. You know, you kind of halve your power consumption like that with LEDs, regardless of changing lighting positions or levels or controls. Simply moving from fluorescent to LED gives you a massive energy saving and carbon saving. And then we just had an order the other day for a sample area for another 10 retrofit trays as well, where people are testing the water. So at the moment, it feels as though people are getting interested. It feels as though the penny's starting to drop, but they're trying it on. Customers are trying it on little areas. You know, no one's come to us and said, "I've got this massive building." Although I understand Arups did a job at their own Manchester offices where they had about 500 Zumtobel fittings that were fluorescent, and they worked not with us, unfortunately, but with another company, and they were supplied with an LED retrofit solution. So again, they kept the whole carcass of the fitting, they kept the louver, simply stripped the lamp holders out, and then retrofitted it with an LED light source. So you save the embodied carbon because you're not remaking stuff that's already there. And as I say, you get an instant 50% energy saving from simply moving to LEDs. So that's the biggest project that I'm aware of, but smaller ones are starting to trickle through, but it still feels a bit like a trickle at this stage.
Yeah, I would say, you know, in terms of where the demand is coming from, we're seeing it coming, for me, I'm seeing it coming from a few different places. So I think the investment market, you know, the new TCFD rules on reporting carbon emissions, although directly speaking, there is not a link to circularity. I think there is a lot of talk in investment circles about, using your money more wisely and driving change through supply chains. And I think the London plan and the whole life carbon assessments that it requires for major developments, there's very clearly a direction of travel. And I think the more proactive, more educated clients who are very interested in leading the pack, these are the ones who are not just looking at carbon, they're now looking into other concepts like circularity, and water consumption and all, social value and lots of other wider sustainability concepts in a much more systematic way. So I think it is a direction of travel. I also think there's quite a lot now, particularly since COVID, of individuals within businesses who their business may not itself be green inherently, but there's a lot of pressure coming from inside businesses to start considering these things. And so you're now seeing, supply chain questionnaires coming out with a lot more, requesting a lot more information on these things. Whether or not that turns into orders for greener products, or whether the desire for circularity turns into purchasing, is fully dependent, I think, on whether or not you've got proper leadership on the issue in the organisation, rather than just an interest in the questionnaire. So that, for me, is where the system, getting leadership is really important.
Yeah. Do people know what the sort of London plan requires in terms of sort of carbon and circularity? It's a real sort of I'd pretty much say it's world leading in its ambitions, and for large developments which are referred to the GLA, you have to do a whole life carbon assessment. I don't think you need to meet targets, do you?
No, at the moment you just have to report, but you also have to do the circularity assessment as well. So you have to do a full, these are for major projects, you have to do a full circularity assessment at design stage to report on how you're incorporating circular design into the projects. Now, of course, they're on major projects, but all of that is filtering through the same consultants, the same investors, the same money into smaller projects. And so, and I think that's so important, is seeing what's happening on major projects is a great indicator of what's coming down the track, for the smaller projects. And instead of reinventing the wheel on fit outs and interior work, we ought to be really looking at what the structural consultants are doing and using those tools within the interiors market, looking at how we can take all of that learning into our...
And I do work on a few circularity statements, so you have to sort of say what you're going to do for this project in terms of circularity throughout its whole life cycle stage. And that also does include, if it's a relevant project, that does include the fit out stage as well. So you do have to hold these workshops now to sort of say, well, what can we do here, in terms of sort of our materials choice, the design aspects, how we can make our spaces more adaptable and flexible. Yes, it includes stuff. So they so they layer the building, and I don't know, Georgia I can't quite remember, space, stuff, skin, shell, structure, substructure. So furniture does come in under that
Remember
stuff.
Brilliantly.
Yeah, I do. So it does include furniture. I guess the challenge is when they're doing the planning application, if they do actually include, the Cat A, the Cat B fit out at that point. So it may not be covered at that point.
It normally wouldn't be, because normally the Cat B would be separate.
So it's interesting the whole life because it includes the furniture.
Well, yeah. I mean, and actually, you make a very good point, actually, because we are I've been doing this for a very long time, so I was going to say we're at the beginning of this. We're not really. Some parts of industry have been doing this for a very long time. But in terms of doing these sorts of assessments at scale across the whole industry, we're really at the beginning of it. And one of the big problems around all of these assessments, whether it's whole life carbon assessments, circularity assessments, and so on, is it's about the boundary that you draw around what you call your project. Because if anyone's done any carbon assessments before, you've got scope 1, 2, and 3. You don't necessarily have to report on scope 3, which is all the stuff you buy, so there's a lot of work going on at the moment to clarify what we mean when we talk about these things. So quite often it's frustrating in sustainability. There's not necessarily a right answer, but it's all part of debating with your colleagues in the sector and collaborating around definitions, you know, driving definitions and evolution of understanding in the sector. So, yeah.
And it's just it's a useful, those sorts of things are just really a useful tool to create awareness and a bit more engagement on those whole issues, really. And there is such a sort of circularity usually improves your carbon. There's a whole nother discussion there, but usually it does. So that it works well in using that as a tool for the whole sort of net zero agenda. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about your company's sort of strategies and targets? Do you have targets for circularity, or, where do you see yourself in sort of, what do you see sort of the next thing for you? Where do you want to go?
Silencio are trying to, in many ways, increasing our sustainability in our assortment. So one thing is, of course, to remain working with only natural material and keep, of course, the function and the good design of the product that we have today, but also increasing features like removable upholstery to be able to provide a product that with a small effort can be given a second life in a new project and a new location. So I would say the percentage of products in our assortment are increasing day by day that has that possibility. And also we make sure that everything that is under the fabric are as good as possible to be able to last for a long time. So we work with massive wood, we work with good quality frames, we work with everything that it takes to make sure that you can use these products for a long time. And it's just a matter of choice actually for the client. The biggest issue is they don't know that it's actually is product on the market that can give you these features. So so what we need to do is educate. You can ask anyone out there. You can go to a professional, to a dealer, or to end clients, and the level of knowledge is scary low, really. So what we try to do is make sure that people that comes to us with requests, we need to correct and educate them and make sure they actually understand what they are asking for. Because people that are in charge of tenders on our market today, the product's knowledge is so low, and therefore we cannot see how they can set the rules for a tender, because they ask for things that no one knows anything about. They have levels of sustainability, of quality that they have read somewhere and added to the tender, but they have no idea what it means. And they have no idea what this product actually gonna be in 10, 15, 20 years. And what's inside. How can you work with this material? They search for, one example, they search for recyclable materials, and they, of some reason, use PET. PET is made recycled material from a bottle. But you cannot recycle the material fiber itself in the product. That goes to the waste and they burn it. That is not sustainability at all. So that is what we are trying to take away. Remove the plastic from the products as much as possible. We just have a small piece of our segment left, and that will be taken away as soon as possible. So try to take away everything that is not recyclable for real, to give everything a possibility to live for long.
So how the client and the specifier is key, isn't it? How do we generate that awareness and education? It's there's so many clients out there, isn't there? You talked about the big developers, and they are doing good things. Some are anyway, or they're looking at it. But there's a whole raft of companies out there. Any ideas?
I have. I mean, at the moment, I think a big problem, and got a colleague in the room who agrees with me. I know, Dom over there. A big problem is the questionnaires that are sent out, that Dennis talked about. Every design practice, every broker, every client, sometimes the developer or landlord themselves has a different sustainability questionnaire that they send out with different questions, different metrics, putting priority on slightly different things. And I know that internally in every furniture company and every finishes company, there's somebody who's practically their full-time job, and maybe more than one person, is responding to these myriad questionnaires. And usually you don't have time to reinvent it every single time for every questionnaire. So there's such a massive lost opportunity. And also, the question set very much depends on the knowledge and understanding of the person who's written the questions, which is really variable. What I think, when I think about systems change, we just need to get rid of that. We need one question set, just one question set that asks the most important questions, and then you can educate all of the buyers and the procurers on what that means and what's important. And then all of the vendors, all the manufacturers know what's important, and they will focus on that. Yeah. And then you get rid of the greenwash, and you stop people focusing on single issue products, which are like, ocean plastic or something, where, or local manufacturer, and blowing that all out of proportion because you've got the right question set.
Or looking at the latest sort of buzzword, if you like.
Yeah,
I hate to call it that.
Yeah, absolutely. But and that would save so much time across the entire sector. So at the moment, if anyone's interested in joining me, we write these questionnaires all the time, and I just want one questionnaire, and I want it to go out to the whole of industry. So if anyone wants to join
I'll join you. So we've got a questionnaire revolution going on here.
Absolutely.
Go on. We need a better title than that, really. But
call it the revolution.
In the lighting industry, they've kind of done that. There's, excuse me, there's a document that's come out called TM66. I don't know how many people in the room might be involved in the lighting side of things, but there's a document called TM66, which is designing for sustainability and circularity, and it's been issued by CIBSE. It's been worked on for a little while. I think there's a new revised version coming out about October this year. But it is, excuse me, it is trying to standardise the kind of information that luminaire manufacturers need to give so that it's easier for specifiers to make a direct comparison on the circularity of different lighting products from different manufacturers. So the lighting industry has got that. So perhaps other stuff's going to be in progress for other industries as well.
Well, I would love to see our professional institutions and our trade bodies stepping up, because I think, one of my big drums that I'm banging on all the time is almost everybody in industry pays membership fees or dues to some sort of institution. And I think that they've grown quite, bloated and lazy through, they have, just collecting their membership fees and doing very little for it. All of us here are scrambling to know what we should be doing in the face of these crises, these big international crises. How the hell do we adapt our businesses to fix this problem?
Yeah.
And they're still collecting our membership dues, sort of sitting there scratching their heads saying, well, work it out for yourself. I think that we should be putting pressure on these organisations to come up with the goods and actually start providing these sorts of tools for our sector that everybody in the finishes sector, everybody in the furniture industry, everybody in a particular sector can use as the tool for that industry, and I think that's one of the things that I think about systems change when I think every company is trying to work on this. No, if we all got together and pushed up, put the pressure above us to say, no, you as representatives of our sector need to come up with the goods, and look at then you change a whole industry, not just your company.
Yeah, I agree. And as you say, if we are members, we should probably make a bit more noise and ask a few more questions about where that money's going and what they do. What's the value of that to us as members? And I get quite frustrated because I don't think we learn very well in the construction sector. We do projects again and again, and we look at the same things again and again, and there isn't really that sort of collective knowledge or sharing. Project teams disband, don't they, after one project? They go on to other projects. So there's quite I just don't think we're very good, and this has been said for a long time. I'm not sure it's getting any better or not in terms of how we really sort of share that information and good practice, and also what doesn't work sometimes. You learn a lot. You probably learn more from what didn't work, and that can be a whole myriad of reasons. But let's sort of do a bit more of a deep dive on circularity. What do you think circularity means in the workplace? And circularity can be quite a big word and can mean quite a lot of things for different people. So maybe if we can sort of drill down into that a bit. Who wants to start? Do you want to have a go?
Yeah, I can start. I would say if you ask anyone out there what circularity mean at their workplace, most of them, I think, the general knowledge about this is, all right, it means that we can buy a recycled product, we can upcycle what we have, and we can try to take care of our garbage in the best possible way. That's about it. So once again, it's knowledge that needs to be added in this subject, because they don't know and how in the world are they supposed to work and live sustainable if they are not provided with the correct knowledge. Somehow we as professionals, we need to be educators and make sure that we do that in a simple way, because if we but most professionals are so complicated when they explain sustainability, so even other professionals have problems to understand. So we need to keep it more simple. Normal people, children, should understand what you are saying. And if a 13-year-old boy cannot understand what you are saying, I can promise you, your clients won't either, because they are on the exact same level when it comes to sustainability. So therefore, we need to find ways to make it simpler, because even if you are really good at explaining, it's hard to make it understandable.
Yeah. I agree completely. And I think part of that, this is all about design, isn't it? So it's very much, telling the story from a very sort of creative visual space, which I'm not very good at, because I'm one of those horrible technical people.
It's hard to get it simple.
Yeah, it's difficult.
We are struggling to find ways to, make it understandable on a one-pager. Try that. It's not simple. It's really difficult, and you need to. But that is the time that you get. Social media, you just scroll. 2 seconds, look. All right, don't understand that. Go to next. So you'll have a little small piece of time to explain what you want to explain, and if you cannot do that, like that, you are gone. There are so many out there that tries to do the same thing. So.
I think as well that we've been fed a lie for a very long time that you can buy your way into sustainable living, and that actually the marketing around sustainability is so powerful. I think a lot of people are quite jaded and suspicious, and simplicity of message sometimes makes people feel perhaps there's a bit of greenwash going on. So it's quite difficult to tread that line. And, I think when you say, how can we get there? What principles? For me, it's moving away from fashion and into longevity. And actually, I think fast fashion, consumerism, this constant turnover is really toxic. That fundamentally is what we're trying to move away from, isn't it? It's buying things, designing things that are durable, that can be very easily and recycling as well. We talk about recycling as if it's a solution. Actually, recycling really at the moment is not a reality. The systems don't really exist for recycling to happen. There are some really shocking statistics that only 7% of resources extracted end up being reused or recycled in any form whatsoever. Meaning that 93% of extracted resources are just wasted globally. And I think recycling is one of those myths that puts the responsibility on others outside of your business to solve the problem. The question always with recycling is about, is there actually a market? Are there logistics? Is there a company out there that not only recycles this now, but will be recycling it in 5 or 10 years' time? What a better solution is to take it right back to the design table, the drawing board, and say, is this a product that will remain relevant and be capable of being used for the next 20, 30, 40 years? beautiful Scandinavian mid-century furniture. I mean, that stuff is going to stay in people's houses forever, and can be eternally refurbished and repainted and recovered. But again, you go back to the system of where's the money coming from, and and then we need to really think about our reuse marketplace, because Grosvenor did a fabulous survey in 2021 looking at the blockers of material reuse, furniture reuse and so on, and structures. And that looked at the blockers for people designing for circularity and the blockers for people, being circular themselves in what they're purchasing. Mainly the problems were around warranty, liability for the life of the product, those sorts of issues, which actually, if we got our heads together, we could sort that out. We could sort out a marketplace and logistics for these things, and a service whereby things can be repaired and get a new warranty. But we need to collaborate as a sector on that, rather than just trying to do it as individual companies.
Yeah, I know it's an easy excuse, isn't it, to put, we'd like to do this, but we don't have the storage or logistics and stuff. So that, and the warranties. And I mean, you must have looked at warranties for sort of remanufactured lighting. It must work for you, because you wouldn't do it otherwise, would you?
Exactly. No, I think perhaps from a lighting point of view, it's a little bit easier in that we can supply effectively. It's not technically a luminaire, but we can supply a new gear tray, the LED boards and the control gear all on one piece of metal. So we can test that, we can safety test it, we can warranty it, because it's a standalone product effectively. So I think from that point of view, the lighting sector maybe is a little bit easier. They're updating BS 8887 or 8777, I can't remember which way around it is, which is the remanufacturing standards. Those are being updated and are due out later this year as well with guidance. Mostly at the moment, it feels it's more like a risk assessment, as in if you retrofit a sports hall fitting, for example, if it's had its IK test when it was a fluorescent fitting, if you're simply swapping the light source over to LED, do you need to IK test the fitting again, impact test it? Probably not, because if it was perfectly acceptable when it had a fluorescent lamp in it, it'll also be perfectly acceptable when it's got an LED light source in it. So it's really kind of looking at each project individually and assessing what you're doing and the impacts of the change that you're going to make. But just flipping back to what you said a minute ago about design, excuse me, I saw a quote a while ago saying that waste is man-made. There's no waste in nature. The output of one process in nature is the input to another process in nature. And in an ideal world, and I think we need to have a bit of a chat about what the perfect looks like, so we know where we're trying to get to, even if we might never quite make it. In an ideal world, you want recycling to be the last resort. And you want reuse, remanufacture, repurpose to all come beforehand. Recycling's the last resort, and then nothing going to waste, because nothing wastes in nature. And we should try and reflect that in the built environment as well.
Yeah, and I think, recycling, I think everyone, because it's recycling, it's good, job done, tick. Same at home, isn't it? We don't necessarily reduce our waste and packaging, but we put it in a recycling bin and think, yeah, that's fine, it's going to get recycled. I think everyone, if they get the opportunity, maybe I'll try and organise a tour, should go round a waste transfer station or a materials recycling facility, just to see, the actual reality of what happens to all that waste. And, some of it does get recycled, but a lot of it gets downcycled and a lot of it gets sent to energy, and so you're just losing that whole value of that material and just replacing it with primary materials. It's a mad it's a mad model, isn't it? But so I think there's much more interest in reuse. From certain clients, but as you said, it's just not easy, is it? And it's all about system change. At the moment, everything's geared towards recycling. All the supply chains are. Get skips in, bins. It all goes into one bin. It's easier to do that way. It's quicker. So what can I know we need to work collaboratively together. But what advice would you give to people to sort of try and do a bit more? You can go. Anyway.
I can go. Yeah. I mean, this is what I spend my days and some of my nights, really mulling over. I think there are a number of things. we need, as I've said several times already, we need to think about the systems, and there's a very, very good reason why we don't reuse furniture, why it's easier to just chuck it in a skip. I mean, we were talking before the event started about Cate Fit Out and the madness of Cate Fit Out, when it comes to resource waste. But look above it, there's a very, very good reason why people do that, even when they know it's only going to last a couple of months and then get stripped out and stuck in a skip. The reason is that agents are telling developers and landlords that you will rent this space out quicker, you'll get a tenant in here quicker if you do a Cate Fit Out. And the landlord can't muck about with that. That represents millions of pounds of potentially vacant space. And so the cost of fitting out, doing a Cate Fit Out and then ripping it all out and sticking it in a skip is peanuts compared to a vacant building. So while we've got that message coming through, that really is big money and real money on the line for these big investors, then they're not going to care about circularity. They're caring about getting people in that building. So I think, but there's a technical response we can give to that, which is, we've now got really great VR. We've got really great messaging we can put in. We can be really creative about, we even started doing things like putting A-boards into spaces and really great marketing messaging in our spaces saying, please excuse our appearance. We decided not to put carpet down here because it saves 1,000 tons of CO2, which is the equivalent of flying to the moon and back, And actually then that makes people go, oh, I really like that. And they get that warm glow that they would have got from a pretty space from actually going, that aligns with our sustainability agenda. And really, changing the messaging about this and making it aspirational and cool. And instead of it being about deprivation and less than and poorer quality and, something that's a little bit hair shirt and hippie-ish, making it about, this is great, you need to get on board with this because it's brilliant. So, I can't even remember what the question was,
No,
but,
no,
but I think we are creatives, we are designers, we are people who are not just here to decide what is the latest Pantone colour and try and shove that down people's throats, that they must refit their entire offices on the latest trend. Let's turn our creative brains into how to make circularity really aspirational, so people are coming to it, not because they care about the environment, but because they know if they do it, they're going to get promotion at work, because that's what everyone's talking about, and it's the new thing,
I I think very much goes with the narrative, doesn't it? It's much more interesting to have a bit of a material or furniture or, a bit of wall that, there's got a bit of a story behind it. Maybe it has had a previous life. We should be sort of, telling that in a real sort of, animated and interesting way, because people do respond to that, and so it's bringing in that, not all the techie boring stuff, but how we relate to everything, from us and our emotion. So what processes do we need? Have we got enough processes in place? There's talk about, I do a lot of pre-refurbishment audits, a right pain. I'll go into a building like this, and I shouldn't be doing them. It's crazy. They get people like me to go in. I'll count the amount of carpet tiles, ceiling tiles, lighting, toilets, doors, all the fit out, sometimes the walls that are going to go. I'll calculate that in terms of the material quantities and give them recommendations for hopefully reuse and then recycling. Shouldn't need me doing that. They should know that already. That should be baked in at the very beginning, and they should already sort of have an idea of what's going to happen to all those products if they come to a new sort of fit-out cycle. Anyway, so I shouldn't be doing myself out of work, but but what processes do you think do you think we need which can enable more circularity?
I think we need to first of all decide what is considered to be a good product to actually recycle at all, because the quality that we demand on an office today and the things that make people actually enjoy their days when they go to work is that the office actually feels like a nice place to be in, and if you take this too long and be a hardcore sustainability company, it might end up to be a collection of products that actually has lived a long time, but they are not functional, they are not so pretty, and the overall feeling in the office ends up to be not so good. So there are actually products out there that doesn't meet the demands that our offices needs today. We demand, especially after the pandemic, we need better quality. We need better functional products. We think in different ways. We know a little bit more, slightly bit more about what inside the product that we have around us, and we care about that. So therefore, if you have like a bad product from the beginning and put a nice fabric on that and say, hey, look at that, looks good. Yeah, but it's still crap underneath. So therefore, I don't see that. And if that product also should provide some kind of function. For us, acoustic function, acoustic features at all. Old products, they didn't have that at all. So even if you put like this thick fabric on it, it will still not be a good acoustic product. It might look good, but it doesn't fill the function that it needs. And lightings, for example, of course you can update it to become a good modern light, but the old version of it doesn't meet the needs that it takes today, maybe. So so there are so many things that I think could be actually exchanged to new products just because it takes a little bit more today. And if you buy that product in the correct way, in a good quality enough, that product will have a really long life. And I don't know what's best, actually, to use a bad product and try to extend the life of something bad really long, or exchange that to
Or
something
start again.
good that can last
and
long
it's
as well.
it's difficult, isn't it? You know, because you don't really want to get rid of a product that's already even though it's not performing very well, unless you can, unless you know that it can be recycled or reused. And it's not easy.
No.
I think that's a very good point. I think there's going to be a lag where we've still got this crap furniture, as you say, in the market that really we can't do a great deal with. There's going to be a lag of that coming through the system for the next 5 to 10 years. And there's very little you can do with that. You know, we are left with the old solutions of either just incinerate it or break it up and recycle parts of it. You know, there's just not much you can do with a rubbish product. But I think what that means is right now, from today, we need to be designing with circularity in mind. So we need to be designing with standard componentry so that, you can't have a part discontinued, screws, bolts, fittings, fixtures, bits and pieces. They need to be easily replaceable with standard sized parts that you can just get from B&Q. So your office manager doesn't have to go to a website where that company's gone out of business, and so that particular little noggin that they need no longer is made, so the whole chair is wasted. We need to be thinking about, can this be resprayed? Can it be repainted? Can it be recovered? What are the options for end of life, and not just some specialist recycling route, but in standard reuse. Could an office manager call somebody in and just get this repaired? Or does it have to go to some wild and wonderful place? And I think that is a design challenge starting right now, because like I say, you've got to work through the system, but we also then need to think about who is going to be doing that remanufacturing. Well, that's where we need to start thinking about logistics systems and can we license people to repair and re-warranty our product? Well, we need to start talking about that. All manufacturers in Clerkenwell should now be discussing that. Can we collectively license places to repair and reissue warranty on our product? So there are systems things that maybe that's not going to help the chair today that's getting disposed of, but it will over the coming years fundamentally change the way that people buy and sell furniture. We then also need to look even higher up around things like the tax system. We need to be lobbying government about why is it that we're not getting tax relief on, remanufactured product and those sorts of things. Because you follow the money, really, as I've said about the money, it all goes back to what costs. So if we can get incentives on buying remanufactured, reused products, overnight the market will open up, and that will drive innovation.
And I think we also need to be a bit, when we talk about circularity and circular economy, the focus is very much on that circular word, not so much on the economy word, which brings in all your sort of financial value thinking. And I just don't think the way we look at our costs and how we buy things and our accounting procedures just don't really, that longevity piece isn't really sort of, the benefits of that aren't really sort of costed in. So, and if that isn't, it's really hard, isn't it? Because cost, lots of things, I've worked on projects, and then you'll get the QS going, oh, well, it's not budgeted for, and then so it doesn't happen. Then the contractor comes in, value engineered. I hate that term, value engineered out, because they just tend to engineer all the sustainability value out at that point.
Well, it takes the value out of everything, doesn't it? It's just cost reduction.
Yeah. So to me, that's I think we need to be much better in the way we show the costs and the economics behind all this. But you must have been able to do that because you have set up sort of a remanufacturing scheme, which must work for you financially. Well, I hope so anyway, in time.
It does. I mean, the finances are interesting. If you've got a 600 or 600 4x14 watt fluorescent fitting, which was quite common in putting offices over the last 20 years or so, if you purely want an energy saving, you can take that out, scrap it, and put in a cheap edge-lit LED panel, and you'll halve your energy like that. But the product you're putting in is not circular. Okay, so energy saving and circularity from a lighting point of view don't necessarily go hand in hand. We will have a hangover, we as in the lighting industry will have a hangover of the products that have gone in the last few years, as you were just talking about. There was, not reliance, it's the wrong word, but there was a lot of product coming in from the Far East, all based on cost. When it fails, you can't do anything with it, you can't fix it, you can't maintain it, it's got to go out, you have to get another one. And there's a lot of that product out there, and that will take time to filter through and come out of the system. It's the same as you were just saying for furniture. So the lighting industry and the furniture industry are very similar from that point of view, but products now are starting to be designed with circularity in mind, with end of life in mind. The TM66 document that I mentioned earlier, designing for sustainability and circularity, is helping things. Starting to see a few specifications come through where products have to have a minimum TM66 rating to be considered. So we're starting to see some of the big consultancies get on board with things like this. As I mentioned earlier, Arups in their Manchester office have done it to their own offices, their own light fitting in the offices. So it's starting to come, but it just needs a bit more, right?
Yeah.
It can't come quick enough. And also just talking about the finances as well, we're doing a sample area for someone. I spoke to him yesterday, and he was saying that he was struggling to get the budget for it because the maintenance team didn't think it was down to them. The CapEx team didn't think it was down to them. And he's like, knock your heads together, sort it out. This is going to save the whole company some money. Can't you do half and half or something like that? And you've got infighting within departments, within companies.
Yeah.
And
it's that
it
CapEx,
just seems,
OpEx
that's
thing,
it.
isn't
It just
it?
seems crazy that no one's like, look at the bigger picture. Let's sort this out and make it happen. But there's that, we were talking about earlier, that lethargy, that drag. People either aren't aware of the situation, which I find a little bit hard to believe, or the seriousness of it maybe, or they don't care, or they do care, but they don't know what to do or how to start, or there does seem to be a kind of lethargy around it, and we need that to kind of disappear somehow, which comes through education, I guess, and awareness.
But from a manufacturing point of view, you manufacture products. Is it better from a reliable supply chain? If you've got a source of materials coming back, which you can reuse, is that a better model? With the volatility of supply chains these days and the cost of materials and that sort of thing.
Well, since I've been with Synergy and Revitalight, we've moved our supply chain, so we no longer get our extrusion from China. It's now all sourced in the UK for that exact reason. It has been talked about through various different lighting companies about like a buyback scheme, or possibly even a rental scheme, going back to Cat A fit outs. You rent these fittings for a couple of months while you get tenants, and then we'll take them back. I'm not aware of any lighting company that has yet successfully completely implemented that. with regards to the logistics of getting stuff out, getting it back, storing it somewhere, and all that kind of stuff. So it's being talked about, but it's not quite there yet.
And do you do take back or lease back or?
Yeah, actually, two ways. We since we have our producer of our raw material, the stone wool that we have inside our product as the absorbing core, they have already today. They are taking back the material itself from producers like us, and also from construction sites, and bring that into the process and mix that up with the new virgin material, and therefore we already now have a percentage of recycled material inside our products already. So that circle is almost closed, I would say. When it comes to products, we offer our clients to, when they buy our products and they have done what they want with it and it needs to sell it or whatever, then we can offer them to actually come, pick it up, separate the materials, and recycle everything in a good way. And that is just a service to provide to make sure we can guarantee that everything is handled properly and not thrown to the waste. So yeah, we do what we can with the products that we produce, and we have producers like Rockwool in this case that produce our stone wool. They do the same. Yeah. So and everything else we need to ensure that our fabric producers also do the same, and so on. So it's a long chain of different producers that needs to do their thing.
Yeah, and I think this is where government come into play, although I can't really see any sign of it yet, and it's sort of extended producer responsibility. So you do put that requirement on the manufacturer to take back products at the end of their life, and therefore they will think a bit more about how they're designed for that end of life. I shouldn't say end of life, I should say next life, really.
Well, I think that's really crucial, and moving into concepts of service, so furniture as a service. And what do we need for that to happen? And once you provide furniture as a service, you are inherently, you're going to have a pretty crappy business model if you're producing furniture that falls apart. You need then to produce it with long life in mind. But what's it going to take for, furniture as a service to really become scalable?
Yeah. We're going to do questions in a minute, but you can ask one now if yeah, go on. If you've got a burning question, go on. Just for the camera, but I think it's just to say you are offering these services. You've made it work. It's just how to really get sort of traction on it, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is a massive question, and I also feel the frustration of it. I do see projects, and Ripe, I'll give you back the compliment as well. You are leaders in this, and I do see Ripe projects doing incredibly well. And I think that there needs to be an education in the sector, because I think a lot of people dip their toe in reuse or remanufacture, or, early when the logistics weren't there and the quality wasn't there so much. And it still isn't there largely. I mean, the reason people aren't doing it is because the way that projects generally are managed, the time that's allowed to do it, the budgets, the way that the program is structured often doesn't allow people to think differently. And so there's very much a cut and paste attitude of processes and design from one to the next. I mean, if you go to a typical design and build contractor or an interior design house, they're moving very fast and decisions are being made very quickly. And that doesn't necessarily key into the opportunity for reuse. So if you are thinking about circularity on a project, you do have to think differently, and you need to start that process much earlier and build those links with people like Ripe, and there are other companies available, but links with experts in that sector early to work out which projects are prime for this model, and get serious about it with your programming. I think that people have dipped their toe early in reuse and have got burned by it. and actually have been let down by supply chains, and in the end have just gone, oh, sod it, we haven't got time, you know, and they've then turned their back on it. But I do think that whenever you work in sustainability, you've got to keep a flexible mindset, and you've got to keep trying, because things are moving so fast and solutions are coming up all the time. You can't just say, well, we tried it once, it didn't work, and so we're never going to try it again.
Yeah.
You have to keep on networking, looking for solutions, meeting new people, trying things, and it's hard when you're running a business and it's based on reputation.
But a lot of it is
But
just,
they do exist.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just sort of creating those relationships, isn't it? And developing those knowledge of areas. Let's open up to the floor. So, yes, please.
To actually build on that, because I think that from my personal experience being client-facing, there's confusion around sustainability and circularity, people thinking that they're the same thing, when that's not the case, and there's not enough education out there for people to realize that just like biodegradable and compostable are not the same thing either.
Yeah. So do you have a solution?
I do think the solution is in the design intent. Very much, a lot of this comes down to intention. And I think going right back to the very first thing I talked about, which is about, is this greenwash? Is this a marketing message? Is this just some bandwagon that you're jumping on and you're just creating some nice buzz around this being a green product? Or is your intention that at the end of life, or end of first use, this product will have an ongoing purpose and an ongoing life? If that's your intention at design stage, when you first sit down at the drawing board, then I almost don't think the way in which you solve that problem necessarily matters. It is about applying those principles. So you will choose the materials on the basis of what works for that product, because again, not all raw materials that are out there are suitable for every purpose. But you need to sit down at the drawing board at day one thinking about what is the ongoing purpose and life of this product. And as long as you apply that thinking at the beginning, I think the technicalities sort of work themselves out, because you've thought about that in a systems way.
But it is, isn't it? You're very right. It's thinking, and you know, projects I work on, they don't want to think at the end, you know, into the next life. It doesn't even enter their their imagination.
Well, it's thinking about selling.
Yeah.
Is really what our businesses are about today.
Yeah.
It's about, I've got to design
Yeah.
something that sells. What happens to it after that is none of my business.
And I go, well, what about end of life? Have you thought of this? And they're like, well, it's, you know, it's got recycled content in it. And I'm like, well, that's not quite the same thing. And then what? Yeah, so anyway, another, yes, please.
Does BIM kind of come into any of this?
BIM. Does BIM come into any of it? Who wants to talk about BIM? No.
I'll talk a little bit about BIM.
It's fine. I can say a bit about BIM.
So for those that might not know, BIM, B-I-M, Building Information Modelling, the idea is you have a digital copy of the building created before the spade even touches the ground and starts digging the foundations out, if I'm right. The idea is that you can calculate the embodied carbon in all the products, and then you have a list of everything in the building, and presumably then at that stage create a plan of what to do when it's taken out of the building, when it comes to its end of its useful life, when it's not wanted anymore, or whatever reason, and what the constituent components are of those products and what can be done with them. So in theory, yes, BIM should be great for this.
But I've got a but there.
There we go, yeah. Probably.
No, you go ahead.
But I'm not sure how many projects actually use BIM to its fullest. And that's, and yeah, there we go.
Yeah, and I think, and it doesn't necessarily collect all the information that you need for, you know, for circularity. So it is probably quite good on knowing your material quantities, but when you're looking at what can happen to those different materials at end of life and different end of life scenarios, I think it's quite weak in that perspective.
I would say that it is something that we look at on our projects, is how you, so because we also do whole life carbon assessments, and BIM can be fabulous for that, you know, but again, there's BIM and there's BIM, there's different ways of using it, and so you can just say wall, you know, or you can create the build-up of that wall and then get actual information about different material types, you know, and really valuable information for a whole life carbon assessment. So, and circularity, you can, let's let the sirens go. The way in which BIM is used, and again, it goes back to my previous point about intention, is why are we using BIM? And really get that clarity at the beginning when the client is and the design team are sitting down talking about whether or not they're going to use it. Well, what is it for? And if at that point you say, well, it's about providing information for the whole life carbon assessment, is about circularity, then that defines the amount of detail that needs to be put into BIM. But also, you know, this costs, you know, using BIM properly for circularity and carbon assessments costs a lot of money. And so you do definitely need a client who's willing to invest that amount of time and money in the building of the BIM model to get that. What I would say is that if they are committed to circularity, you can tag information even about the repairability and the spares, you know, and the manufacturer of the product and where it came from and all, you know, the Pantone colours so they can get it resprayed or repaired. You can put that in BIM, and then that creates a database for people then who want to repair later. But again, the amount of information that goes into it is, there's a direct link to the cost.
And
So, yeah.
I also don't know if, you know, BIM, the model gets updated as the interior changes as well, and it really needs to become into that living asset, you know, information model. Yes, another question?
Well, just as an interim measure, you were talking about furniture and with what you can.
Yeah, great to hear. We haven't really talked about that work at home, have we? And the flexibility there. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, just come and get it. We'll pay, you know, we'll pay for it, or the van will drop it off to you.
I think there's a link as well that not only are we giving things to people, but we also need to then be responsible for taking it back off them. Because the other thing is when you give, we find this very much in the furniture industry that they say, oh, it's been reused. What they mean is they've put it all in a shipping container and they've sent it to somewhere sub-Saharan Africa and they've dumped it. And then, you know, half of it's broken, you know, nobody knows what to do with it. It just then ends up, you know, being dumped or fly tipped if it's no good. You're very often dumping a problem on other people rather than circularity. So again, we need to think what happens when they finish using it. Yeah.
But maybe that goes back to, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, lobbying is, well, you know, we've had a lot of conversations about this. Lobbying, the pressure from the chemicals and the plastics industry to maintain their business is enormous. And the lobbying, you know, there is pressure on ministers and civil servants to not change fire regs, to not change, you know, move away extended producer responsibility, you know, to not bring those sorts of things in is massive. So again, with every client I work with, I try to get them engaged in positive lobbying, because if you're not in the room where these conversations with the big industries are happening, where they're saying, well, we couldn't possibly update the fire regulations because people will die, think of the people, think of the children, you know, actually, and we start saying, well, no, if we start designing with natural materials that are non-combustible, then surely that's a better way. No, you know, and there are big forces behind this. We need to get in those rooms. We need to start putting an equal or even greater amount of positive pressure on regulators to say we need regulation to change to support circularity and to support sustainability. Because what's happening at the moment is you've got some civil servants with great ideas and a massive force of corporate lobbying against that. So we need to be getting politically active, and we need to start pushing. And if you don't want to do it personally, get your professional institution or your trade body to be doing it.
Yeah. Very quickly, because I think we're going to wrap up, but yes. Yeah. 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 The QS.
I have
The QS.
I have answers, but I'll let somebody else
Well,
speak if you have answers to it. Are you sure?
Very quickly.
Very quickly. I would say don't get disheartened with what is in front of you right now, because what we're working with is a broken system that doesn't support sustainability. What you need to do is do the best that you can right now, but you need to think about the system and you need to start attacking the system. That's where meaningful change is going to happen. So there are things you can do depending on the type of person you are. There are things you can do that will be the most effective, the much more effective than worrying about what's on your project today. You can start by, I became an Extinction Rebellion activist because I was just so frustrated about the lack of change and the pressure, eco-anxiety and all of this. Protest, activism is incredibly powerful because what it does is it puts pressure on governments. It shows that there is a will nationally for change, for positive change. Geek speak, political geek speak, it moves the Overton window, which means the more people protest, the more people bring these issues into the news, the more the general populace wants change and is happy to see government change. Even if it's just by small degrees, they're much more willing to see positive change than they would if people weren't out on the streets protesting, no matter what the Daily Mail tells you. The other thing you can do is start participating in steering groups and committees and pilot projects that are seeking to address these bigger issues, because your knowledge of the blockers is so important to bring to those steering groups about why things aren't changing, what are the blockers that you're seeing again and again on your projects, and how can they be tackled. So go up a level, go up, write to REBA, or RICS, get involved with them. What are you doing?
So I think next
Upward
year,
pressure.
there's definitely, as part of Design Week, there's a bit of an activism week going on as well. I don't know what that looks like, but, do it as part of the week and do some, some of that protest type. She knows lots more about this. Right, let's wrap up. Is there any sort of final words or takeouts you want to say?
Yeah, something that was talked about a little bit, but what we need to do is what we see in requests and tenders, that the will to actually ask for really high sustainable products, recyclable and everything, but they don't value that high enough when they decide to choose who to work with, because they put like 80% criteria for price, and then sustainability get maybe 10% and local awareness 10, and that's it. Therefore, you need to dare to actually put 70% on sustainability, and don't give a damn if you need to pay a little bit extra for that, but you just take a stand and say, all right, this is what we want. And if you dare to do that, you will have really nice result out of that, and you will still get a good price, because everyone actually can provide that today, but they don't dare to do it because if we do this, they're gonna pick someone that is cheaper. So you need to change the way of evaluate a tender.
Yeah.
That is super important.
And that comes back to also what you're asking in terms of sustainability, doesn't it? Alex?
Just a change of mindset all the way through the supply chain and awareness. I think that's what's needed. People need to just change their opinion, change their views. Why are we changing this? Why are we throwing it away? Why are we buying a new one? What can we do instead, rather than just chuck it away and get a new one? People like new shiny stuff. I remember people used to queue up to buy the latest iPhone or the latest PlayStation. They'd queue up outside the shop for 2 days beforehand. People like shiny new things, and there was a bit of a stigma attached to reusing something, but that needs to change.
It always comes back to people, doesn't it? Technically, we're good at solutions. We can come up with solutions. It's always people. Do you want to say anything else?
I think I've pretty much said it. I always think, my whole mission is not about how can I make this project and this company and this thing more sustainable. It is the question of what is it? What are the problems in the system that prevent me from being able to be more sustainable? And being like the 5-year-old in the car, going, why, until you get to the source of the problem, and then tackle that. Because when you tackle that, it releases everybody to do better, not just your one project or one company. So collaboration, systems thinking, looking up, applying pressure upwards, that's where I think we all need to focus.
So we've all got some actions to take home with us. Go and talk to our member institutes, make sure that they're making a big noise, but also helping us. Let's look at how we procure and put our PQQs and tender evaluations, and we're protesting next year. So thank you, everyone. I hope you really enjoyed that. Thank you very much to all the panelists. It's been a really interesting discussion. I think, is there some drink now? Is there drink? I heard cool. So thank you very much.